everyone, and welcome to this episode of Business Unwrapped. I am joined today by my guest, Nick Hawkes, a finance professional with decades of experience as CFO and finance director. Welcome, Nick. Nice to have you.
Good morning. Thank you for bringing me onto this. I'm looking forward to talking through some stuff.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Today, we're going to talk a little bit, and we have talked last week as well, but today we're going to talk a little bit about one of your latest finance transformation initiatives. We're hoping you can share some insights into your experience with that and how it all went and some lessons learned towards the end. What would you say was your first step on that journey?
Okay. I guess where I start was I came into a business that was an SME and it was really looking to grow, but it had, when you start to look at the back office, it didn't have sufficient software support that would help that business grow. It wanted to go from £10 million to a 30, £40 million business. And you can't do that on the existing software. Part of my background was having worked in finance direction, very close to running IT teams and that sort of thing. And I was sort of director responsible for digitalization. So it was very important for me to start to look at this element of the business. And what I found was it was obviously a small business grows on the back of, I think we use Sage Line 50. So it was a relatively small application for a small business, but we were already above the number of transactions that apparently Sage could really have in the application. So it was already beyond capacity. And in addition, we had two separate sort of applications that were in-house built. So it was very good and built two. One was around procurement, because although we don't build anything, we do procure a lot of equipment, and project management. So some of these projects were sort of £30 million, £30,000 contracts, up to £30 million contracts over sort of 18 months to 2 years. So it was a very important element to start to look at. It was also an on-premises application, the Sage one was, and we had Sage payrolls. There were some real challenges for us, and there were various sort of elements where there were single points of failure. So the on-premises version would potentially fail. And if this guy had left the business who wrote the applications, then we would have been in real trouble if any of those sort of changed. So those were the real drivers for the business as we saw them. And so it was important to start to think around what we needed to get out of anything new, and to look at those sort of elements that we felt needed changing. And the first one was we wanted to move away from an on-premises station to a cloud-based premises. 90% of our business, although we're based in the UK, 90% of our business is international. So we do have offices globally. So accessing the application through the internet was a very important element of that. I think the other one was, and I've seen it quite often, that you can often have an application that will be a version and you continue using that version, particularly on premises. And then in 2 or 3 years' time, it starts to be upgraded by the application provider, and you're behind already. And you then suddenly have a massive application upgrade to do, probably at a time when you don't really need it. Operating in a SaaS environment was very important, because we did find that we had upgrades on the application pretty regularly. And so we had always felt we were up to speed. They gave you an output. They'd obviously done their own internal testing, and they'd give you an understanding of what changes were being made to that upgrade. So this was under the new application. So for us, we were always on the latest version of what they were using. So it was again, that was a very important part of. So those were the key drivers of what we wanted to do. So that was important.
And you put that together in a business case.
So for us, the business case was important, and it was important for me to write the business case, because it was a way of documenting the thoughts of how we were going to upgrade to a new system. And it started off with what were the issues with the old system, what we needed to do. So what were the requirements of the new system? And in that process, then you start to map out team structures, timelines, who you want to work with. So we ended up building this business case, but to get there, we had to do our own sort of desktop analysis of applications. So we used the Gartner report to have a look at
Mhm.
what were best in breed. We were very conscious of not calling it finance system, because I think as soon as you call it a finance system, everybody thinks it's finance and finance are
Yeah.
going to do it. But it was a business system because it needed to be operated not just by finance, but by project managers and lots of
Mhm.
people involved in operations and HR and all of those sorts of things. So we were very keen to have it as a business application. So that was a very important thing. So the things for the requirements, I've written them down here. So cloud-based, access to the internet, single source of data, needs integration and efficiencies, taking away three different sort of applications we had in the old system to just have in one. It needed to cover foreign exchange because a
Mhm.
lot of our work was done in foreign exchange, so currencies. And so that was very important. Need to do consolidations, that sort of thing. It needed, for us, it had to have value for money as well, because you can spend a lot of money both on implementing and then running system.
Yeah.
And so we wanted it needed to be a mid-level application. SAP, for example, would have been too expensive and probably would have overkilled what we wanted. So we came up with, to do through that desktop review,
Mhm.
we came up with 7 to 8 applications that we started to look at in a bit more detail. We narrowed those down to 4 to 5, and we invited those to do a demonstration. And that was the first way of understand the application, but also talking to the vendors as well. So you get a feel
Asking
for,
questions.
yeah,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
they present it and how they come across, and always
Yeah.
looking out for yes, we can do that, and we can do that. And it's, you have to challenge these things.
Yes, exactly.
Um, well, we did that. We selected 2 final applications. One was slightly more expensive. And in the end, we preferred option, primarily because we felt we could work with a vendor. They had a very good methodology as well, how they felt this,
An implementation should be run. Yes.
that was good. And so we set that out. So we'll talk around the project team
Mhm.
structure shortly, because that's very important. But the timeline that we gave ourselves was around a 10-month delivery timescale. The longer it goes on, people start to lose interest. So I think that was 8 months of working with the vendor in terms of setting up, well, defining the requirements, and then going through a configuration basis, and doing all the testing, and then doing the training. And then we allowed ourselves 2 months of parallel running.
Mhm.
Uh, we went live. So it was a structured approach to that. And I think that was very important. Project team and the structure of project team is so important, because this is a cultural change to the business. You're moving to an important software application, which is
Yeah.
replacing everything we've had before. So you have people who are nervous about, well, I
Yes.
like what we did here and we've got to move to this new. So there's some real challenges. But the way we structured it, and my experiences in the past, is that you've got to have as much horsepower involved in it. And so we had a project sponsor who was the MD. I was
Mhm.
the project director, and then I had 2 people who worked under me. I had a project manager, but he only worked 3 days a week, and I had a financial controller as well. And so I decided that I needed a project lead, and that project lead was actually really a project administrator. So they would cajole and set up all the meetings, make sure all the actions had happened. One one element I saw, and it's no reflection of finance. Finance are trying to do their jobs, but they'd always start to look at this new system at the end of the day. So they might put
Yeah.
an hour into it. And for me, that was never going to work, because you'd never get anything done in the last couple of hours of the
Exactly.
day. So this was a very important, because it drove momentum of the project. And underneath that, then for each part of the business, so finance, we'd have the financial controller as the lead, and we'd also have a second. So in case he couldn't turn up to the meeting,
You.
have a delegate day.
Yes. Yes.
Delegate. So we had procurement, we had project managers, we had HR involvement, we had the IT guys as well. They need to know about that. And I think that really did work,
Yes.
to keep that momentum going and getting people involved. And probably out of all of those people who are in their project manager, you get some people who are really nervous of new systems. So you will see them backing away. Um, project managers were probably the most challenges because they were working obviously on their own projects with customers, and therefore spending time trying to do, help with the system was always a challenge.
Hmm.
But we got through that quite well. So is the project management and the timeline and project plan are so important to get to grip with that. But you do have to have a good level of input from everybody in the business.
Yes, it's a very good. I like hearing you talk about how you created the timeline of the project, because very often I hear about people wanting to implement a system in, I don't know, 4 weeks, 3 months, or something like that, which from your experience and mine, we would
Yeah.
probably roll our eyes and say,
Yeah.
yeah, never going to happen. But it's hard sometimes to convey this message to people who haven't gone through something similar in the past. When I meet people such as yourself who have done this before, if I come in and say it's probably going to be more like 6 months to a year, you will acknowledge that because you know everything that goes on behind just configuring a system. Because people tend to look at, yeah, if we have the requirements on day one, then in 3 months we have the system configured. But that's not the entire.
Yeah.
That's not the entire project.
No.
Uh, yeah.
No, no,
So
you're absolutely right. Because if they set your requirements out and you go for each section of what you're trying to do, so the finance bit or the project management bit, you're sitting down with the vendor's representative. They're capturing those requirements. They're going to configure the element of what
yeah,
you're looking for, and then you're going to have to test it, and you're going to have to see. And then often it doesn't quite meet what you want, so you've got to
you have to refine
change
it.
it.
Yeah, tweak it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the business case was really good. It was signed off by the board. I mean, I have to say, I and the project manager wrote it, and I have to say, it's probably one of the best business cases that I've seen, and partly because it just gelled in terms of everything on there. And actually, what we put there was some capex costs. So capex cost itself was actually the third party who came in and helped us as project lead. The rest of it was under SaaS, so it was OpEx, and we did
Mhm.
find savings. Importantly, often you put a big system in, and actually we needed to show savings in terms of efficiency of
Mhm.
using, and how many hours might we save for people doing various parts of that.
Mhm.
So it got signed off, and it was pleasing. In that document, it talked around the methodology and had the project plan, but the most important element for me was this thing, which was around what does success look like? So it's all right writing this business
Yeah.
plan, adopting and implementing, but you need to have a look in 6 months' time and think, where are you on that? Have you achieved all the things you set out as a set of requirements? So that's really important because it's a test that what you said you're going to do is what actually
Versus what you actually
happened.
achieved. Yes.
Yeah. And often you get sort of 80%, but you still got bits that you haven't quite done. And it took another probably 12 months to bed the system in fully to get everything up and running.
Mm.
So that was important. And we could talk around some of the challenges. One of the biggest challenges, and you look back, and that was around reporting. So the system had inbuilt reports, and we didn't test them to the level we should have, because when we did come to use them, one of the key things to the software was you could upload and download into Excel.
Mhm.
That was important. So you could upload journals at the month end into it from Excel and paste them into
Mhm.
this. But equally, you might want to run a debtors report, and it was done in. Trying to think what it was done in. You could download that report into Excel, but because of the way it had been formatted, nothing was in the right column. You'd have various
Ah,
bits, just the way. And so so you ended up having to write
yeah.
some of these things yourselves. And quite often that's the important thing. If you want getting the data and the transactions working is fine, but actually as a business, you want information out from there that is
Exactly.
quality information for the teams, for the board, that sort of thing. And that I think is a fundamental. We didn't quite put as much effort as we were more concerned on getting transactions and all those right, but actually the output is really important. Getting those right was very important, and something probably we should have put more
Yeah.
time.
I think there's always an element of attraction when a vendor comes in and says, this functionality is built in. You don't have to do anything. It works out of the box.
Yeah.
And Many times it does,
Yeah.
but if you want to bed the system within your processes and make sure that it aligns to your requirements, then many times you have to tweak that out of the box functionality or build, especially on the reports, exactly
Yeah.
as you said. I think there are so many ways to report on the same numbers, so many formats and so many layouts. And when people are used, and I know this goes against the change management principle, but when people are used to looking at the numbers in a certain way, they might expect you to do that with the new system in place as well. So yes, that's one of the things where sometimes people get caught off.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We did have post, what went well, the project team structure was good. Project configuration, how we got the application to be configured properly. And we had to sign that off as well. It wasn't the vendor are very keen to make sure that we're happy with the requirements that they're
Yes.
proposing,
Yeah.
because they're going to go away and configure, and that will take a couple of months to do that. So we had a very, a professional implementation team across the business. Some people needed dragging, kicking and screaming to help out. And just generally the professional knowledge of their implementation team was good. We had somebody came on quite regularly and went through
Mhm.
various challenges that we were seeing on there. Um, some of the challenges, though, as I said earlier on, was this: we needed to make sure this wasn't seen as a finance application. It wasn't a finance system; it was a business system to be run by the business, and that was really important that people got that, because otherwise they just give it to finance and gone.
Yeah. You needed people who could roll up their sleeves and be part of the process, not just, yeah.
Yeah, we talked about reports, so you need to test them all and think around the outputs where, as you say, people have got used to getting information out of the system uh, previously, and you've got to replicate that. And in many cases, do better.
Yes.
Lots of the reports could be done and output to Excel, but also came in graphical form as well. We did have a look at their graphical layer as well. We actually, because we'd gone down the Microsoft 365 route, we actually went and implemented Power BI as a layer to cover
Mhm.
that and some other applications we are running that was separate to that. So
Mhm.
that was something that we needed to test a bit more before we did it. What we found, I think, which I think is important, although the vendor was good, we did have some challenges once it had gone live. So we did find some of the support cases taking too long to be
Mm.
solved,
Interesting.
and the application itself sometimes very slow. So we talked some time ago around, you get to the month end and you find it when it's being run on over the network, their own sort of system, suddenly a transaction from a keystroke might take 30 seconds for it to go through the system. And this wasn't good.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we originally got kicked back, and they said, oh, it's your network and those sort of things. But we did do lots of those tests to prove that it wasn't. And actually what it proved is that actually they hadn't configured their servers at their end. They able to allow so many people on to update the system at the month end. We were calendar days,
Yeah.
calendar end, which a lot of businesses are. So everybody using that software was on there at the time. So they did end up reconfiguring that, adding additional
Mhm.
capacity in their network to deal with that.
Something that I sometimes do on the projects that I'm involved with, if it's a system with high traffic, high number of transactions, there's a part towards, even before user acceptance testing, even before you give it to the users, there's a part where you can run concurrency testing. So to see how many users can log into the system and work without being kicked out or without experiencing huge amounts of lag time at the same time, but also see how many transactions can be performed at the same time. And sometimes you can automate this kind of test. For example, you can do a large upload of journals in
Yeah.
the example of the system you were mentioning, and just see if it's able to cope with that amount of. Usually, you would test, if we talk about performance testing, to try and test a little bit more volume that you would normally have. Okay, it's a little bit hard to define what the volume will be because, as you said, the company is growing. Yeah, you're gonna go from, I don't know,
Yeah.
5 companies in the group to 10, maybe, in which case it will double. But in any case, if you take an average over the past year, let's say, and then you add a 20 or 30% on top, that should give you a good idea of the amount of data the system needs to handle. And in terms of concurrency, it's not always easy. And it's not, when I was working on the vendor side, people will tell me I'm buying 100 licenses, i.e. 100 users. So concurrency is 100. It's not really. And you shouldn't try to build a system that can handle all your users in it at once, because
Yeah.
that may never happen.
Yeah.
But 80% of that, I guess it's a good sum rule. And yeah. But good of you to mention, because that's something sometimes gets overlooked indeed.
And I think you need to keep the pressure on the vendor as well, because what you're going from is the
Yes.
implementation team who are very keen to see you succeed into the normal support environment. Therefore,
Yeah.
you're in, your
By
clients
yourself. You're by
yeah,
yourself.
with a lot of ones. And
Yeah.
so there's a change in how they respond. And I did write to the vendor on 2 occasions saying that we've got these support calls lodged, and some of them are 6, 7 months old, haven't been dealt with properly. Some of them have been closed when they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So you do have to put that pressure on the vendor to keep them up to speed. And we did have a monthly meeting with their own project support manager
Mhm.
for us. So that was a useful thing, just because once you're in there, they're keen to sell you more product as well. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
we started to have a look at a couple of things. We did look at their CRM system, but we decided it wasn't what we needed at that time. So they're always keen to move that on and see what else they can sell to us. And that's part, that's a favor of the software.
It's also an advantage of working with a SaaS vendor, right? They're interested in you continuing to renew with them. They don't want you moving to another platform. So they want to keep you happy, and they want to make sure you have a customer success manager assigned to your account who is in regular contact with yourselves and making sure everything is fine. So you do have an escalation point. Whereas for an on-premise application, once it's there, and
Yes,
they,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
no,
it's a different
yeah,
proposition.
yeah.
Okay. So what do you think is next on the journey?
I think the key thing, and we're seeing this you starting to see this generally, is the development of AI within software. So uh, I guess pre AI, we started to go down the route of looking at, you know, is there anything we can do more intelligently? So accounts payable, for
Mhm,
example,
mhm.
there was a software addition as to the system, which would allow an invoice to come in and be registered automatically in the system and pretty well
Yes.
do all of the sort of the processing of against a purchase order
Mhm.
and delivery notes and that sort of thing. You do have to have your transactions running properly in the background, because if you don't, all you'll get is a lot of invoices going into query
Mhm,
because
mhm.
you can't find this, that, and the other. You can't find the goods received note, that sort of thing. So it does require a lot of back office work to do that. But in theory, that gives you a lot of ability to manage transactions with effectively fewer people, or at least if you're growing the business, you'll always have one
Yes.
piece, but you don't have to have another 3 or 4 if you're growing it to 30 million. So that was an important element. You can also do that on accounts receivable, that sort of thing. But I think we're starting to see AI on a lot of this, and some of this is being developed within the applications themselves. Some of them are using sort of open AI. So some will use Chat GPT and that sort of thing. But some of them are being inbuilt by software companies. I did see something online the other day around it was going to be rolled out, and they'd built their own AI to help intelligently look at data within your system and start to really get some insights into what the business is doing and that sort of thing. So I think AI is going to be very important to start to really drive value of some of these applications.
Yes, I think it's a good tool to help us automate tasks which are repetitive, which you don't really need a human being fully involved into that. They can be used for the more creative, insightful jobs within the company. And then I think AI is the way to go. And I've seen many vendors out there, as you very well said, implementing AI within their solution. I think that's a good way to go because they tend to not just give you a publicly available model, but make sure that model is trained on their own specific application or domain, if it's a domain specific system. Because OpenAI, it's trained on the internet, right? Yeah, it will look at an invoice and it might interpret it differently than the way you guys interpret invoices in your own organization. If they're specific to yourselves, like project specific invoices versus products or material specific invoices. Yes, I think indeed finance transformation is never really quite complete. There are always incremental steps that you can take to improve on the processes within a company as the company grows or the landscape changes.
Yeah.
Um, I think, I'm looking forward to seeing the next step in that. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking with you today, and I'm looking forward to seeing what next you'll create in future.
Okay. No, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me on.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
day. Bye
Bye bye.
bye.